for Jagga Jagga.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, this legislation is critically important to the water security of basin communities. It will rescue the Murray-Darling Basin Plan, and that plan and the river itself are in need of rescuing. Our country is facing an environmental emergency, and if we don't act now to preserve the Murray-Darling, we know that our basin towns will be unprepared for drought. We know that our native animals will face the threat of extinction. Our river ecosystems will risk environmental collapse, and our food and fibre production will be insecure and unsustainable. So a healthy basin does mean healthy communities. It is really vital that we have a river that provides clean drinking water to 3 million Australians every day in the healthiest possible situation it can be. This is an important moment for basin communities and for any Australian who cares about the health of our environment. And in the context of the health of our environment and the health of our rivers, I do want to reflect more broadly on the work our government is doing across water, waterways and the environments that they are connected to, because it is all interconnected. It's demonstrative of the approach our government is taking on water and environmental issues, led by the Minister for the Environment and Water, that we are looking at these issues in a holistic way. We're not taking it piece by piece. We know that there is so much work to be done across the country to protect and restore waterways and to protect and restore our environment. And we do have a strong agenda for supporting rivers and waterways throughout Australia, including in my local community. I have spoken in this place before about how my community of Jagga Jagga is home to many waterways. The southeastern boundary of Jagga Jagga is, of course, the mighty Yarra River, or the Birrarung. The Darebin Creek is in the southwest of the electorate, and the Coorong, or the Plenty River, and the Diamond Creek cross through the electorate. And on the far northeastern edge of Jagga Jagga, we have Watson's Creek. These are all very important waterways in my community. And across Australia, the population growth that we've seen in decades can be traced along these rivers and these waterways, and the use of them and the importance of them to those communities. The Yarra River, in fact, in Melbourne, can sometimes be regarded as a dividing line. We do joke in Melbourne about whether you're from the north or the south side of the river and what that means for you culturally, but it is also a connector. And in my community, any day of the week, you can see people drawn to the river, walking, canoeing, spotting wildlife, spending time together. And so our waterways are important for so many reasons. And so those initiatives, as I said, that our government is taking to look at waterways across our country, including the Murray-Darling Basin, are really important. For communities like mine, it's initiatives like the Urban Rivers and Catchments program, dedicated funding for waterways and supporting the environment in my community. We, in fact, in Jagga Jagga have 3 projects underway under this project. At the Yarra Flats Park alongside the Yarra River, along Darebin Creek, and in Eltham North along the Diamond Creek. These rivers are, I will acknowledge, a bit smaller than the Murray-Darling Basin, but again I highlight that they are interconnected. Our commitment to protect waterways across our country extends from the mighty Murray-Darling all the way to these waterways in my electorate of Jagga Jagga in the city of Melbourne. This is really important, and our government is not afraid to take up the challenge that is before us, to take up this work that has been neglected for far too long, to do the work that is needed to try and restore and protect waterways across this country. Deputy Speaker, at last year's federal election, our government did make a promise to deliver the Murray-Darling Basin Plan in full, as it was designed and in line with the science. And with this legislation, we are fulfilling that promise to the river system and to every community and every Australian who depends on it. The agreement that Minister Plibersek recently struck with New South Wales, Queensland, South Australia and the ACT is historic. It's an agreement that will deliver the plan in full after a decade of sabotage and delay by the Liberals and Nationals, another issue that those who were formerly in government failed to land Another issue that they put in the too hard basket let lapse, and we are suffering the consequences of that. And in fact, the Murray-Darling Basin and the communities along it are suffering the consequences of that. This new agreement is a balanced and reasonable agreement. It took more than a year of detailed consultation to put together. It includes 450 gigalitres of water for the environment, and our government has worked with the states and territories, with farmers and irrigators, with scientists and experts, with environmentalists and with First Nations groups as we put this plan together, because we do know that we all need to work together to make the plan work as it should. The measures contained in this bill offer more time, more options, more money and more accountability around how we do this work. More time to deliver the remaining water, again based on expert advice. So this includes the recovery of the 450 gigalitres of water for the environment by December 2027 and the delivery of water infrastructure projects by December 2026. More options to deliver the remaining water, including water infrastructure projects and voluntary water buybacks. More funding to deliver the remaining water and to support communities where voluntary water buybacks have flow-on impacts. More accountability from Murray-Darling Basin governments on delivering the remaining water on time. And for this aspect, federal funding will in fact be based on achieving water recovery targets within deadlines. And that is really important. Again, we know across our country since the time of Federation, we have had these issues of resources being shared across states and territories across our country. It is important that all of us are accountable, all levels of government, for their roles in delivering on this plan and on protecting the Murray-Darling and supporting the communities along the Murray-Darling Basin. This plan does deliver more water for the environment, more certainty for farmers and industry, more financial support for affected communities, more protection for native plants and animals, and more hope for Australia's most important river system. We shouldn't lose sight of why Australian governments designed the Murray-Darling Basin Plan in the first place. Without a plan in place, we know where we end up. The next drought is most likely just around the corner. We have seen the devastating impact of drought in our country all too often. And we know how devastating a drought is on those communities that rely on the Murray-Darling Basin. And so having a plan in place, having a plan to get all those levels of government working together to support those communities along the river in the basin, to help us through what we know will be dry years, to make sure that there is enough water flowing through those systems at what could be its lowest moments. It is a challenge that our government has taken on to help rescue the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. A return to common sense. We're not interested in trying to score political points here. We're not interested in trying to play communities or groups off against each other. We recognise there are a myriad of interests that come together to rely on the Murray-Darling, and we are interested in trying to work with all of those groups, all of those people who have a stake in this most important river system, putting the plan back on track. For too many years, it was, of course, off track. For too many years, in the too hard basket. For too many years, politicking happening around the plan. Trying to play communities and interest groups off each other. That is not the approach of this government. We really have come back to the basics, to the point of view of remembering what the point of having this plan is, to ensure that we have a healthy and sustainable basin for the future. We are working to get it back on track, and I'm really pleased that that is something that this government has brought such focus to here with the Murray-Darling Basin Plan, and as I said, has also brought focus to with our support for rivers, waterways across our country, and for the environment more broadly, where we are once again trying to make up for a decade of denial, for a decade of not doing the work that should have been done to protect some of the most iconic and important environments in our country, to protect areas that are habitat for endangered species, to make sure that we protect what is left and both restore and enhance it. Deputy Speaker, as I said, the original deadlines for the Murray Basin Plan was set for June 2024, and in fact, in the early years of the plan, we were on track to meet those deadlines. But during the Liberals and Nationals, during their 9 years of government, they spent their time sabotaging the plan. We've seen this time and time again from those opposite in their approach to government, not delivering, just politicking, not doing the work that our country needed for the long term. They in fact tied projects up in impossible rules so that they couldn't deliver water savings. They blocked water recovery programs. They tried to cut the final recovery targets to keep them below scientific recommendations. And as a result, progress slowed to a dribble under those opposite. And it is a great shame that because of this, it is now impossible to deliver the plan on the original timeline. In the 9 years of the Abbott-Turnbull-Morrison government, they delivered just 2 gigalitres of the 450 gigalitres, which in fact put, under their efforts, the plan on track to be completed sometime around the year 4000. Sounds very sci-fi, doesn't it? I can't really comprehend what life might be like around the year 4000, but I think it's safe to say that the Murray-Darling Basin probably wouldn't be surviving under the trajectory put in place by those opposites. So, as I said, it is very important that our government is now getting on with this, has put this plan in place and doing what those opposite could not do during their long 9 years in government. This plan will deliver more water. The 450 gigalitre target has its own funding mechanism, the Water for the Environment Special Account. The Coalition were told during their time in government that this wasn't working. They were told that in the first Water for the Environment Special Account report. They were told that in the second Water for the Environment Special Account report. They knew this program had stalled completely, but again, for 9 years, they kept a pause on water recovery. So this legislation removes that pause so that we can finally deliver the water, giving this account more flexibility in line with the Water Act's objectives. With these changes, we are opening up the full suite of water recovery options. We will be able to invest in on-farm water infrastructure, in land and water purchases, and in other novel water recovery mechanisms where it is sensible to do. We will be able to purchase water from willing sellers where it's needed to deliver the plan. We do know that water purchase is never the only tool in the box. It is not the first tool at hand, but it does need to be one of them. This is critical nation-building work. As I've said, the Murray-Darling Basin is vitally important, obviously, to all the communities along it, but it is also important to our entire country. It is an iconic piece of our natural landscape, and we all have an interest in making sure that it is protected and that it is healthy into the future in a climate that we know is changing, in an environment where we know it is likely that we will face more droughts and challenging weather. It is so important that we have in place a plan that is deliverable, a government that is willing to do the work to deliver that plan, a government that is prepared to work with state and territory governments, that shared accountability piece that we all have for the Murray-Darling Basin to achieve the aims of the plan, a government that knows that we have to get on with this rather than focusing on the politics of this, and a government that does all of this work in a broader space of trying to restore, protect our environment around the country after too long, almost a decade of denial, almost a decade of critical pieces of our nation's natural infrastructure being lost to us through the incompetence and the denial of those opposites. So, Deputy Speaker, I'm very pleased to be supporting this legislation. It is very important to our country.